Over the last 4 decades, America's economic landscape has drastically shifted, leaving middle-class households under immense financial pressure. Between 1979 and 2024, productivity in the U.S. skyrocketed by 80.9%, yet hourly pay increased by a mere 24.7% during the same period. While businesses and the economy flourished, the typical worker's paycheck lagged far behind, creating a growing gap between economic growth and individual financial security. This discrepancy is more than a statistic. It's a driving force behind the growing crisis of homelessness among middle-income earners. A June 2024 survey revealed that two-thirds of middle-income households believe their income is falling behind the cost of living, highlighting the financial strain felt across the country. Social media platforms like local community groups on Facebook paint a vivid picture of the struggle. Full-time workers are increasingly seeking advice on where to find assistance with rent or utility bills. The stories are heartbreaking. Families who never expected to face financial insecurity are now at risk of losing their homes. This isn't an isolated issue. It's a systemic problem rooted in decades of wage stagnation. The Economic Policy Institute estimates that a 1 percentage point drop in unemployment can boost wages by 0.4 to 0.9 percentage points for workers near the median of the wage scale. However, since 1979, the U.S. economy has spent far more time with unemployment rates above the natural rate of unemployment than below it. Between 1949 and 1979, the actual unemployment rate was cumulatively 15.3% below the natural rate. In stark contrast, from 1979 to 2017, unemployment was cumulatively 35.7% above this threshold. These prolonged periods of high unemployment have directly suppressed wage growth for middle-class workers. This imbalance has far-reaching consequences. The rising cost of essentials, housing, healthcare, and education, continues to outstrip income growth, forcing families to make impossible choices. For example, in 2024, the average rent in the U.S. surpassed $2,300 per month, and childcare costs reached nearly $11,600 annually for one child. These mounting expenses leave little room for savings or economic mobility, deepening inequality and pushing the middle class closer to the brink of homelessness. Why is the American middle class struggling? The death of mobility, the death of the middle class. Once a defining feature of the American spirit, geographic mobility has drastically diminished, reshaping the economic landscape for middle-class workers. In 1948, over 20% of Americans moved annually, seeking better opportunities and higher wages. Fast forward to 2022, and this figure has plummeted to 8.7%. The situation is even more alarming among job seekers. 29% relocated for jobs between 1986 and 1997, but by 2023, only 2.1% did so. This decline in mobility has stark economic consequences. Historically, moving to high-productivity cities like San Francisco or New York offered workers opportunities to earn higher wages, gain valuable skills, and ascend the income ladder. Today, such opportunities are often out of reach due to skyrocketing housing costs. In June 2024, the median home price hit a record $426,900, pricing many out of thriving urban centers. The median home price in the United States has skyrocketed over the past few years, pushing homeownership out of reach for many who were once able to comfortably afford it. From 2001 to 2022, the median rent for middle-income families soared by 23%, reaching an average of $1,400 per month. According to the National Association of Realtors, the U.S. is currently facing a shortage of 4.5 million homes. Meanwhile, the demand for homes has continued to grow. In 2022 alone, the number of families in the U.S. increased by 1.8 million, yet only 1.4 million housing units were built to meet that demand. The result? Housing prices have skyrocketed, placing homeownership out of reach for many. The struggles of the middle class. At the national level, The middle class is typically defined as households with an annual income ranging from $53,740 to $161,220. These households were once considered secure enough to enjoy a decent standard of living. However, in recent years, the reality for millions of Americans living in this income bracket has dramatically shifted, pushing them toward an uncertain future. As of June 2024, a staggering 65% of middle-class Americans reported struggling financially and do not expect their situation to improve in the foreseeable future. This sense of financial insecurity has been exacerbated by rising costs, stagnant wages, and unexpected financial crises, leading to an increased risk of homelessness for many families who were once considered solidly middle class. Kyle Connolly, a middle-class American from Pensacola, Florida, is one of the many who can attest to this growing financial strain. He describes his life as a constant struggle, with every month feeling like a tightrope walk. Financially, things have definitely been a struggle for me. I don't know how, but every single month I somehow manage to get by, and I'm left with maybe, this past month, I was left with $125 in my checking account. And that's it, Connolly shares. For him, any unexpected financial emergency, like a medical bill or car repair, could push him over the edge and lead to homelessness. Connolly's situation is not an anomaly. It's becoming a reality for more and more middle-class families across the country. Inflation, coupled with a sharp rise in housing costs, has stretched family budgets thin. In fact, 75% of middle-income families report that they are actively cutting back on non-essential expenses. From dining out less to reducing entertainment costs, families are doing everything they can to make ends meet. But despite these efforts, 73% find it increasingly difficult to save for the future, let alone plan for emergencies. This financial squeeze is especially concerning given the sharp rise in homelessness, particularly among middle-class families. According to recent data, the number of homeless families in the United States has grown significantly in 2024. The alarming truth is that many families who once comfortably fit into the middle class are now at risk of losing their homes altogether. Rising rent prices, coupled with stagnant wages, make it nearly impossible for many to afford stable housing. The impact of globalization on the middle class. The wage growth crisis among middle-class Americans is driven by a mix of globalization, remote work trends, and policy decisions. Trade with lower-wage nations like Mexico and China significantly impacted middle-class manufacturing jobs. Between 1995 and 2013, wages for workers without a four-year degree dropped by 5.6%, equating to a $2,000 annual loss for median-wage earners. While proponents of globalization highlight its benefits, critics argue that trade agreements disproportionately protected corporations, such as software firms in Hollywood, while leaving middle-class workers vulnerable. Remote work, initially seen as a boon during the COVID-19 pandemic, has added another layer to wage stagnation. Despite its flexibility, remote and hybrid roles often pay less than full-time in office positions. Research suggests remote workers could earn up to 30% more by returning to office settings. This disparity undermines the financial stability of workers who depend on remote options for their work-life balance. The child care crisis. In recent years, American families have found themselves increasingly burdened by the soaring costs of child care, a crucial service that enables parents to participate in the labor market. The problem has escalated to the point where, in certain parts of the country, families are paying upwards of $25,000 per year for child care services. This is no small amount, and when considered in the broader context of rising living costs and stagnating wages, it becomes clear that child care has become an insurmountable challenge for many. Between 1990 and 2024, the cost of child care in the U.S. increased by a staggering 273%, a rate more than double that of inflation. In a society where dual-income households are often necessary for financial stability, this rise in child care costs represents a significant barrier. Parents are caught in a bind, as they are expected to contribute to the labor force, but are simultaneously faced with a financial hurdle that takes a considerable chunk of their income. In fact, in 2023, 67% of parents reported spending at least 20% of their annual income on childcare, while 89% said they spent 10% or more of their household income on this essential service. This disproportionate spending leaves families with less to save for other critical needs, such as housing, food, and health care. The situation becomes even more untenable when we consider the wages paid to child care workers. These workers, many of whom are responsible for the well-being and development of the next generation, are often underpaid, exacerbating the strain on families seeking affordable care. Child care workers, in many cases, earn wages that do not reflect the value of the work they do. In fact, the median wage for child care workers in the U.S. is just $12.24 an hour, far below the national median wage, which is well above $20 per hour. This imbalance has led to widespread shortages of child care providers, making it even more difficult for families to find suitable and affordable care. Compounding the issue are the regulatory challenges that vary from state to state and locality to locality. In many regions, overly restrictive child-to-staff ratios or zoning restrictions on where child care facilities can operate create barriers for providers who are eager to meet the growing demand. These regulations often make it harder for new child care centers to open and operate, leading to further shortages. This is a marketplace in disarray, with too many families vying for too few spaces at unaffordable prices. The strain on families is not just financial but emotional as well. Many parents, particularly those with multiple children, face the grim reality that paying for child care would essentially negate any financial benefits from working. One parent expressed that if she had to pay for full-time care for her 3 children, her effective hourly wage would drop to the equivalent of just $7.50 an hour. For many, it just doesn't make sense to work when the cost of child care is so prohibitive. This dynamic forces families into difficult decisions about work, income, and family life. However, there have been some glimmers of hope. In 2021, the U.S. embarked on an historic expansion of the refundable child tax credit, a move aimed at easing the financial burden on families. This expansion was not only more generous, but also reached further into the middle class, making it accessible to families earning up to $100,000. For the first time, many families who were previously excluded from the child tax credit due to their income were able to benefit. This expansion represented a crucial step toward providing relief, helping families cover child care costs and other essential expenses. Yet, despite its success, the expanded child tax credit was a one-time experiment that expired in 2021. Since then, policymakers have advocated for making the expanded credit permanent, but resistance in Congress has stalled efforts to implement lasting reform. The fall of union power. Union membership in the United States has seen a precipitous decline over the past 40 years. In 1983, nearly 1 in 5 workers were unionized. By 2023, that number plummeted to just 1 in 10. This trend starkly contrasts with other nations like Canada, Germany, and the UK, where unionization rates have dipped but nowhere near the same extent as in the US. The consequences of this decline are striking. Full-time unionized workers in the U.S. earned 15.9% more than their non-union counterparts in 2023, underscoring the economic benefits unions provide. Yet, despite these advantages, employers have grown increasingly hostile to union organizing. More than 40% of companies involved in unionization efforts face allegations of violating federal labor laws. Alarmingly, 1 in 5 unionization campaigns includes charges of workers being illegally fired for organizing,